Warning is flashed along the Civil Defense Network. Yellow alert, then red alert, attack imminent.
This country is ever subjected to an enemy attack. What I am going to show you now might someday save your life.
The threat is enough for the government to decide to take away our civil rights. Now we have the Patriot Act, and now we have the NSA listening straight downhill slide. It will make the Holocaust look like small potatoes. It'll make what Stalin did to the people of Russia small potatoes. It'll make the killing fields in Cambodia small potatoes. It's going to have a lasting effect that you can't apologize for. The Cambodians are becoming more democratic. They're apologizing. All over the place, people are coming to the realization that they can't exist without each other.
It's very unconstitutional.
In disobedience to laws and treaties like the Constitution of the United States.
Congress has to declare war, and the president does not have the authority to just launch on command.
They're now restarting a whole new generation of atomic bombs. I use this word mad in the same because that's what it is. It is just beyond comprehension. Nobody, if they would sit down and have a cup of coffee and think about it, they'd back away from it. It's almost a misnomer because people misunderstand it. I don't mean crazy in a sense of sort of a throwaway word. I mean crazy in a really, really sociopathic way. General Ney, he was in command of Strategic Air Command, literally tried to start a war with Russia. He flew a whole bunch of planes right out of Russia to try to get them to attack, and he was going to go in and bomb their cities in so-called a counterattack.
There was a period where the kids would have, instead of fire drills, they had air raid drills.
In the schools did mean getting under the desk.
Ducked and covered, the siren would go off, we stick our head under the desk and cover our heads to protect ourselves from a nuclear bomb. It's madness.
Everyone had to take shelter. The city had to be totally empty.
There was a huge scare in the city, the safety of the children. A lot of people bought away and thought seriously of leaving the city permanently. Went away for weekends, figuring that maybe on weekends the bomb would come. And
Still see pictures of civil defense shelters.
We had a government that believed that we could have a survivable nuclear attack.
All nuclear powers continue to provide this myth.
The most rigorous test of America's civil defenses is coordinated from this Washington Nerve Center. A simulated hydrogen bomb attack that strikes at 75 key targets from coast to coast. Here, every phase is followed as if the attack were real.
Heading south-southwest.
All through the cities and towns, you had civil defense.
Now, there were no shelters. So what this meant was you would go into the nearest subway station.
In the cities, police and civil defense teams clear the streets.
There was a crazy, idiotic plan that in the Empire State Building, if you were anywhere from the 40th floor down, you would go down to the basement. But if you were from the 100th floor to the 49th floor, you would go down to the 49th floor. As if the bomb is going to destroy everything above you and below you, but you'd be safe on the 49th floor.
Now, I'm not here to try and fight. As a matter of fact, Americans just don't scare easily anyway. And it's a good thing that they don't in this atomic age. But it is a part of my job as Federal Civil Defense Administrator to give you the facts. This sketch will give you a general idea of the fallout pattern. So much for the threat. Now, what are we going to do about it? Basically, there are only two things you need to know how to do to protect your life. One is to evacuate your city before the bomb falls. The other method is to dig deep enough into the ground to escape the effects of blast and heat and radiation.
The whole thing was absolute madness because in the event of a nuclear war, none of this would make any difference at all. Anywhere close to New York City, there weren't going to be any survivors, and certainly not on the 49th floor of the Empire State Building.
Meanwhile, from the Pentagon and other key points, top defense figures are airlifted to secret control centers from where they would direct America's defense and counterattack.
In June of 1955, Ammon Hennessy and Dorothy Day and other Catholic workers and friends,
Dorothy Day and A.J. Musty and Bayard Rustin and Ralph the GM,
were arrested for being on the street of City Hall Park during the air raid drills. Her statement reads, "We make this demonstration not only to refuse to participate in psychological warfare, which this air raid drill is, but also as an act of public penance." Her action against the nuclear weapons brought her around again to focus on the poor and how all these things are connected in our society. In the next issue of the Catholic Worker, Dorothy Day wrote an article called "Where Are the Poor? They Are in Prisons Too." Half the article is about their action, their appearing before the judge. The judge of the trial said in effect that they were, quote, guilty of the murder of 3 million people in the supposed attack of New York City. But the second half of the article is about her time in prison. She describes the people that she meets and her thoughts and feelings about our prison system. She recalls about how there are prisoners around the world, both just and unjustly imprisoned. And so this experience of the air raid drills and getting arrested also led her to think about its connection with these works that she was devoting her life to, the work for the poor, and it clearly demonstrates how the works of mercy are in complete opposition to the works of war. They returned each year after 1955 to demonstrate the same as they did, just out on the street.
In 56, Dorothy was in the House of Detention. 57, she was in the House of Detention again. 58, she was in the House of Detention again. Each year she was refusing to take shelter.
And then in 1959, in conjunction with the War Resisters League, and notably David McReynolds, there was thousands of people.
I thought it was really insane that we were locking up Dorothy Day because she was sitting in the park. When I talked to Bayard Rustin about it, we would try a 3-level approach. Come down to City Hall Park on the day of the drill. By being there with us in City Hall Park, you would have indicated your opposition to the pathology of people thinking there's a place to hide from a nuclear bomb.
Eventually, the air raid drills became not compulsory nationwide. There was a push for people to build shelters in their backyards.
For some time, we have urged that every family that possibly can build a basement shelter or an outdoor shelter. It is equally important that residents of suburban and rural areas, many miles removed from major cities, also build shelters. They should stock them with emergency supplies of essentials such as blankets, first aid kits.
In my humble way, I went down to the cellar and they told me if you had a card table and you covered it with a cloth and you put some supplies underneath it. Now, up till this point, I had 4 children, but the 5th on the way. I realized that I had to do something, so I got in some water and cans of fruit and tuna fish, and I even remember to get the can opener.
I'm going to tell you, when I was in high school, it would be high school, junior high school in those ages, I can remember looking at these manuals about how to build a bomb shelter, right?
Well, how about our friend Dita, who 60 miles outside the city built a state-of-the-art bomb shelter with food and beds.
Simple underground shelter with 3 feet of earth covering will give you virtually complete protection from lethal radiation.
I couldn't figure out how it worked. It didn't work. But the government was selling these things and convincing people to be building these bomb shelters.
Not only were most American corporations jumping on board to push and be part of this program, GE, Westinghouse, AT&T, Dow Chemical, etc., but our prestigious universities joined and insurance companies went full tilt advertising their special protection plans for an attack. And just like we sold our liquor then, cigarettes and cars with blonde women to go with them.
So we had this dinner party, and we had several of our neighbors. One of them built in his backyard, under cover of darkness. He had these people digging this huge hole, and he fitted it out with air and water and bunk beds for his 4 children, food for 6 months. And he had the grass cut out and matching the top trap door and a lock on it, and he had a shotgun ready to shoot anyone who wanted to come in. Someone else said that he had found out that if you had cinder blocks that went a certain way and then another group that went that way from ceiling to floor, that blocked the bomb's fumes. And then my across the street neighbor, who was a steam fitter in New York, he said, well, I didn't do a thing. And there was a shocked silence. I mean, everybody, you didn't do a thing? No. He said, look, when that bomb falls, he said, I'm going to be in New York working. My kids are going to be in school, and my wife's going to be in Bloomingdale's.
And they finally went to the hospitals and said, okay, we want you to prepare for a nuclear attack. And it took a while. But the medical community finally said, the emperor has no clothes. We can't do this, and you can't do it either. There is no such thing as a survival nuclear attack.
And with that, he sat down. There was this silence. It's only now that I can laugh about it, but at that point, we thought this was a man who was not interested in his family. That's how serious this problem was.
You have someone like Eisenhower, a general, and certainly was not a liberal or a radical, but surprised us. When the press asked him what he thought, he said, well, it's a very serious problem. You know, I understand the idea of having these shelters. I don't know, though, Mamie and I have talked about this, and, you know, if there was a war, would we really want to come up out of the shelters afterwards? And he blew the whole thing to hell.
I remember that card table down there.
I envisioned, though, here we are down there, and it's been weeks, and everything's gone except one can of tuna fish. And I was saying to myself, do I really want to give it to these kids who were dying anyway, or do I want to have that for myself? And then I thought, well, this is not doing you any good at all. So let's forget the whole story.
I'd like to emphasize this one point in closing. We'll do all we can in the federal government to get information to you on defense against these new weapons as fast as the scientists can give it to us.
And what were top scientists not working for the government saying?
These weapons are just stupid and inappropriate and of no value and highly, highly dangerous. So get rid of them. That's it. And you'll all be a lot safer.